creepy, spaced out music for today, Charles.
Also a creepy, spaced out image.
Exactly. Well, that's par for the course, I would say, right?
Well, this is really, again, another triumph of the art department. I mean, it's on so many levels. I don't know if the viewers can see to the same degree that we can see it up close here, but I mean, here you have an image of, this is obviously a takeoff on Ancient Aliens, which is, honestly, if you're watching TV to sort of cleanse your mind and relax and you're not trying to see anything serious, it's a very funny show to watch. Especially those of us who think that CNN is fake news. I believe in certain ratings periods that Ancient Aliens is going higher than CNN.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, it might be more accurate.
That's right.
Well, and of course, our regular viewers have come to realize that it's one of your all-time favorites.
Yeah,
so it's nice that we finally had an opportunity. I don't even know what this guy's name is, who's the host of the show, but Hillary's got his hairdo today.
Yeah, and the image for me, it's almost as if this Egyptian god figure over here is looking at Hillary, sort of saying, "Wow."
I also do love these giant heads from Easter Island.
Oh, yeah.
We recently had Brian Forrester on the show, who gave us a lot of insight into some of these ancient mysteries that are perhaps evidence of historic technology that no longer exists. Brian presented some very compelling evidence of cutting tools, and he's very scientific in his approach and obviously highly educated, not crazy, sort of normal haircut.
Right. Well, yeah. What this Easter Island, I mean, I've never been there, and I actually would like to go there. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if Larry David's very distant ancestor was sitting around one day and say, what can I do to cause the rest of human civilization to wonder what was going on?
Giant heads.
So put some heads there.
Well, they dug them up and then they buried them again. Like Thor Heyerdahl in the 1950s dug them up.
All of them or just one?
Well, one of them, and it's a whole body. It's not just the head.
Sunk pretty deep.
And then they reburied it, which didn't make much sense to me. But, we've got a lot of exciting things to cover today, Charles, and there's been so much happening in this past week. I guess it was Monday or Tuesday that Michael Cohen was giving that...
Lying his ass off, you mean?
Well, certainly historic testimony. I've never seen such stupidity in one, congressional hearing. I love how Jim Jordan was just like verbally...
That's right. Yeah, that was really... very sad, actually, to watch. I mean, on many levels. I mean, here's a guy who, he's got a family, he's married, whatever, and he is dumber, apparently, than a box of rocks. I mean, he's not, I don't know why Donald Trump would use this guy for anything serious. I mean, he just has displayed no judgment.
Yeah.
He's transparently lying.
Yeah.
And there's something actually just out, I didn't put it in the presentation, in Conservative Treehouse about Mueller having threatened Cohen's wife with 30 years in jail.
What? Over what?
Unless, Cohen changed his tune. So,
threatening the wife to go to jail,
that's
or that Cohen would go to jail?
No, the wife. That's a trick that the Enron task force used very effectively in securing a few prosecutions of, I think it was Fastow's wife, and that's the approach they take. If they can't get you at first, they go after your wife.
Wow.
But just back on Cohen, I mean, it wasn't. That Congress would have said while President Trump was busy in Vietnam trying to accomplish something that was pretty important, that it was reasonable to give the floor to an admitted liar to spout off and make accusations that the Trump team would have no opportunity to defend, but that would gain currency because they'd be flying around the world on all the mainstream media. That the House would make that kind of decision. Elijah Cummings would do that kind of stuff. Just tells you the degree to which they're going to play dirty pool.
Yeah.
And it should, if nothing else, stiffen President Trump's spine and say, listen, these people are going to, make promises about behaving nice. I remember Hillary saying, until the midterm elections are decided, I won't be in a position to interact normally with the Republicans. It's like, I don't have to be decent to the other side. And that's the way they think.
Yeah, I mean, interact normally. What do we,
Yeah, right.
what do we really expect there? Michael, I mean, there was one decent point raised during the testimony. I forget who it was who said it, but he was talking about how they rely on criminals in all kinds of prosecutions, mafiosos who have flipped, as it were, and it was valid. I mean, but then again, how do you trust those guys?
Well, but this is really bad. I mean, the whole idea of going to your lawyer and having attorney-client privilege and stuff like that is...
That's true.
I would never continue using a lawyer who secretly was recording my conversation. Not that it's just, that's outrageous, because why are you doing this, and with whom are you sharing this recording? And,
right.
And the other idea that he wasn't really a lawyer exclusively. He was a lawyer promising he could get access to President Trump and charging fees to dumb corporations who thought they'd get away with that. I mean,
he also had some screwy business going with a taxi medallion company, and this Russian guy, Yevgeny Friedman, who is the taxi king and got all kinds of attorney general, that guy got in a lot of trouble. He's been arrested in sexual harassment of employees or whatever. The other thing that's crazy about Michael Cohen is he's another one of these guys who's posting pictures of his daughter in lingerie. It's like...
doing that? I didn't know that.
Give me a moment, Charles.
That's really bad.
He's tweeting all kinds of things. And he had a kind of a wise-ass confidence to him, which it's not a fake Twitter account, it's a real Twitter account, it exists. They were talking about some Twitter account where women for Cohen were posting like #sexy. It's like, what are you, an idiot?
Yeah, this is a guy, anyway, and he's not going to do well. There was a story, and somebody was saying, one of the internet sites, they were saying that criminals who are in this penitentiary are warning that's his father did that?
That's his Twitter right there, tweeting that with the daughter looking like she's, in Maxim or something.
That's ridiculous.
I know. I mean, it's one thing to allow the daughter to be a model if she wants to, but I don't know. That's not something I would tweet of my own daughter if I had one.
I can't conceive of doing this.
Brains and beauty.
Yeah, Ivy League. I would say that this gentleman is going to be in serious trouble once he gets to prison.
What were they saying about the prison?
The prisoners were saying, Cohen's already made a very serious mistake because prisoners love Trump.
And hate rats.
And hate rats, exactly. So, anyway, the art department here, one fine detail that maybe people can't see is that in the original it did say at the top, disclosure is coming.
Yes.
And disclosure has been in process for a long period of time. That is disclosure of the Clinton, Obama, Bush charity frauds. Yeah. That disclosure was made by the Clinton, Obama, Bush charity fraudsters themselves, and you can't walk it back. It's been in the public domain. People have been soliciting. There's the crime, using the mail, using the telephone, using the internet to solicit donations, whether you get them or not, while false and materially misleading documents are in the public domain. That's the whole way these people roll.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's amazing how few people know about that, Charles. And still engage in that type of activity. Now, the other thing we should tell people, or do we want to tell them yet? We've got a special guest today.
Well, if you'll just give me to the title page, we can do it then. Yes,
of course. And here we are.
Here we are. So why don't you introduced it? Why we did...
well, we sometimes have international guests, and so we need to kind of time shift a little. So earlier this morning, just a few hours ago, we had the opportunity to interview Joe Hoft of the great Gateway Pundit.
It really was a treat, and so we'll get into that in a few minutes.
Some really interesting information came out that I think our viewers are going to be pleased to hear. I also want to thank our sponsors. It's the beginning of a new month, so it's the perfect time for people to get onto subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's very important that the sponsors get on there. There's been a little bit of attrition going on. There's a huge campaign afoot to discredit me and the things that we're doing here mostly by people who have committed felonies in the course of doing that. So hopefully people will stay with us as sponsors. People can also make a one-time sponsorship payment by going to paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. And people are, the phones are ringing off the hook for that Sunday with Charles screensaver. Our $10 and above sponsors are going to enjoy that gift with their sponsorship.
It's very good. So we've been on a tear to try to get people to focus on the public information that's out there that you can see for yourself, but to understand it in context. And while we've been doing this, the resistance, which is really all the media, all the mainstream media, most politicians, many Republicans, and all Democrats, has been fanning up this absurd hysteria about what Trump rightly referred to, President Trump, as bullshit. And what I hope is going to snap into place soon, finally, is the gears will realign and relock, right? They'll be cutting out the bullshit, and we'll be in a position, the Trump administration will be in a position to actually drain the swamp. It would have been very tough to do it January 20th, 2017, because you still had the same judges, you still had the same openings, you still had a lot of people hiding in plain sight, and who were Obama holdovers and Bush holdovers and Clinton holdovers. So I didn't expect the swamp to immediately drain, but I do think that President Trump has, about a year to get the job done, a year and a half before the election, because if there are not clear signs that he's going to do it, people will assume, he's caught by the swamp, and he's going to lose.
I hope
bigly.
He can do it, Charles.
Yeah.
He's got to be in there with the Drano and the plunger and really get to it
right.
now, because we are running out of time.
Right. And what will become clear, I think it'll be a switch will come off, a switch will move, and people will look at this and say, well, everybody knew it was a fraud. I mean, people were, before Charles started talking about it, people were saying they had questions about the Clintons. They're obvious fraudsters. That may be true. Maybe people, and I'll live with that if people say that. But the real thing to understand here is not just the magnitude of the fraud, but the magnitude of the bent decisions that were made at the IRS, at Department of Justice, elsewhere, at Congress to let these people skate.
Yeah.
That's really going to be, to go back over the FBI vault files and say, all right, what was in the file, what went out of the file, what was bleach bit, and who are the people who said, it's a Clinton fraud. Those things, we get paid to overlook those.
I think the reason they put it there is because they know no one's going to actually read.
Right,
exactly. You're going to read that.
That's right.
And it reminds me, Charles, I was at a party on Friday night, and because of Facebook and Twitter and everything, even people who don't watch Crowdsource the Truth, among my, friends from back in the day, they know sort of generally what I'm up to. So there's always whoever's party it is like, okay, no talking about politics or Trump or anything. But then all of the most resistance-minded people always want to engage me in conversation, and they just go absolutely crazy. I think we should consider putting together like a party bullet list that people who are watching the show can kind of keep these things in their minds, so that when the craziest among our friends try to say the Clintons are fine, you can have your ammunition ready to have these kind of conversations that some people get enlightened by it, I have to say.
You'll see I did one page of that today.
Great.
So we'll have that a little bit later in the show. So perhaps we just quickly jump to the next disclaimer page.
Sure.
And we reminded Joe, and we'll remind our viewers, that this is a different approach, this program. It's more than a program. It's not a Trumpian movement, but it is people who care deeply about this, and thank you to all of you watching around the world, and to recommending and sharing this video and the others that we've done. But there's a real opportunity and role for people who watch these videos and think about them and check the links, to then engage with Congress people, and engage with senators, engage with the attorneys general, engage with the IRS, engage around the world, and push and push and push, so that we can finally get a lot of money back for the American taxpayer, and also send a clear message that Clinton frauds will not be tolerated, whether they're going to be emulated by Barack Obama and his people, or other people, the right or across the political spectrum. They're not going to be tolerated anymore. And this, I hope, will serve we hope, as a case study for people to say how not to run a charity. We put Joe Hoft's Twitter address there. I actually followed him this morning.
Yep.
His brother is better known, I think, because he's the one who's full-time on, Jim Hoft, his twin brother, is full-time running the Gateway Pundit. This playlist, Jason, is I mean, I happened to notice when you had it up earlier, just the two of us, that you got 18 million views now for all your stuff?
That's possible, yeah.
Almost 8?
Yeah, 17,500,000 views.
That's a lot of
all
views.
The videos on Crowdsource the Truth. And of course, people who are looking to prepare themselves for the ultimate dinner party could watch all 145 two-hour plus videos, and they'd be very well educated in the various unprosecuted financial crimes. I mean, lawyers seem to be the toughest to talk to because they think they know a lot, but they're generally incorrect.
So corporate lawyers don't, and I've had this discussion with them 4 years ago. Corporate lawyers are accustomed to setting up a corporation and saying, you can do whatever you want to do, basically, because that's the way most for-profit corporations work. And many of these smart-ass corporate lawyers don't actually have a lot of experience looking through the fine details on how charities work. Charities are not allowed to do that if they're tax exempt. And there are special rules about getting your papers in order. And beyond that, unlike in corporate fraud and Enron and frauds like that, where you have to prove that the fraudsters intended to cause harm and also caused harm, you don't have to prove that in a charity fraud. So there's very frequently people will look at this and say, in quotes, lawyers, well, a corporation could do whatever it wants, and you're never going to be able to prove that the Clintons intended to defraud. That's not this requirement, right? So let's put it this way. I have yet to encounter a legal critic who has emerged from the serious discussion, including very powerful experts in corporate and not-for-profit law, who come away saying, "Oh, you're wrong, Charles." And it's been 4 years of this.
Yeah. Well, most of the people that I encounter like to say, like, "Oh, it's been investigated. They did an investigation and they didn't find anything." And I'm like, "Okay, you're one of those people."
Exactly.
And then there's like, "I trust the government." It's like, okay, enjoy that. But seriously, I mean, without being cynical, why would you just say, "I trust the government"? It's made up of thousands and thousands of people who you don't know. Do you just walk out on the street and say, "Yeah, here, I trust you with my bank account, all my personal calls, my emails, every single piece of information about my medical history"? What are you, a taxi driver? I don't care. Take it all.
I'll give you all my stuff, and then you give me back what you think I should
unlocked,
have.
Come on in.
No borders.
It's crazy. Yeah. Absolutely crazy. But
so we have a little bit on the next page, and then. So we're going to introduce you in a second when we rev up the interview, but this fellow Joe is a very experienced financial executive based in Hong Kong. And that's important as you hear his comments, because he gets the kind of things that I was talking about what should be in the audits and how the auditing process works. He's an expert on that. And what they've done is they've done a lot of great work. This happens to be an article where they noticed me. We don't have to put it up or anything, but what they do is they go and they do lots of detailed reports on any story they consider to be particularly interesting. They're all in for disruption, and they're all in for Trump. And you're going to see us talking about, Joe in a second will be referring to something from the infamous Band memo. Yeah. And I decided we didn't have that ready for him because we didn't know what he was going to say. If you look at it, this is lifted verbatim from Doug Band's work. That is not how you spell lightning.
Lightening.
Right.
Yeah.
Lightning, whatever. So, but here he's talking about in this memo that he decided to write up, when you bring in an outside firm of like top-notch lawyers.
Is Doug Band a lawyer?
He is a lawyer as well.
So that's what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. But you bring in a top-notch international firm of very expensive, very well-connected lawyers who are not going to want to participate in engendering a massive fraud.
Misgendering,
right?
Cisgendering.
Yeah. And then you decide, I know what I'll do to impress them. I'll write a memo under my signature, confessing to charity fraud.
Wonderful.
What the hell?
Yeah.
And I'll insist that my work goes through several drafts and gets circulated. And anyway, the deal that Joe Hoft and Gateway Pundit have talked about in a 5-part series here involves basically fake charities, fake companies, fake reporting, fake audits, and fake news.
Yep.
It's all the same thing. It's just all fake, and that's what, to a certain extent, that's what politics sadly has become. The politicians know, most of them, they can get up on a stump and promise, as Ocasio-Cortez is promising, free this, free that, whatever you want. And very seldom do you get called to account. But in the business world, you can't go, as that idiot woman did, who was the one who did the $9 billion fraud?
Oh, from the blood thing?
Yeah.
Theranos?
You can't say that you have a contraption that does miracle stuff and raise a whole bunch of money and then have it be, not really. No, I didn't. I was kidding.
Maybe it'll work later.
That's right. I almost got it right.
Yeah, it's close.
You can't raise money, using telephones and
just
using
a few billion, Charles.
Exactly.
Who's going to notice?
Yeah. And simply what this is, when you hear this interview, as we're going to put up there for a second, just think of the movie The Producers. Right? That's what you're talking about here. You're talking about a bunch of people who, while Hillary's lining herself up to line her pockets by being president of the United States, they decide to create this security company and get all kinds of business and contracts, but not fill out any forms properly. And they nearly get away with it until Gateway Pundit, and specifically Joe Hoft and his brother Jim, did this in recent days, did this 5-part story.
Because we didn't know about that company before this. Oh, you did?
Yeah. But it's an important thing, but sadly it's only a small piece of the gigantic puzzle. This is something that came to light. Notice it says that I believe he's a fraudster. Band is bragging about that the central person that you're going to hear about in the interview is a former client of Teneo itself, a fraud, in my view. And anyway, so this 5-part series came out in the last 2 weeks or so. We invited either one of the Hofts to come on and talk about it. We had a great 30-odd minute piece with him, and without any further ado, I propose we roll right into it.
Okay, sure. And here we go. So, Charles, we have a very special guest joining us from a great distance, Joe Hoft of the Gateway Pundit. Joe, welcome to the program.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful to see you.
Hong Kong is one of my very favorite cities. I've been there, 25 times or something like that. But it's always a pleasure to go there, and you're so lucky to be out there.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a good friend from Manhattan, and he's been out here, and he just thought he loved it. I think there's a connection between it's a big city, it's a lot of people smashed together, and exciting, and a lot going on. So it's a great place to be.
I'll tell you a small vignette. In 2004, I think it was. I went out. I took my children were then young, and my daughter was in a wedding in Manila. And that we had to go to. So she was very young at the time. She was, she was 11. And so my son had then spent a little bit of time in Spain before this trip, supposedly learning Spanish. So we go to Manila first, and then I reward them, take him to one of those fancy hotels in Hong Kong. I forget which one it was now. The Mandarin.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, let's go and have a really good meal. So we get dressed up, and we go down to that fancy restaurant, and I spared the rest of the customers. We went there at 6 p.m., and they show us to a nice table, and the waiter comes over and says to my daughter, what would you like to drink? And she looked at the waiter and said, well, I'll have some champagne. And
how old is she?
11. And, without missing a beat, the waiter turns to my son and says, what will you have, sir? And he said, well, I'm kind of partial to the smoky aftertaste of Lagavulin, but do you have any Macallan?
How old was he?
16. And they served him. It was amazing. And they served my daughter. I love that place.
Manila, of course,
This
The
is Hong-
envelope capital of the world.
No, this is in Hong Kong.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, we're so delighted to have you. And why don't we begin by just having you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and in particular what you do with Gateway Pundit.
Well, great. Thanks, guys, again. Yeah, I've been out here for about 8 years. I work for a major corporation out of the Midwest, and it's one of the Fortune 500 firms. It's in the financial industry. And I started with them about 20 years ago now, so I've been with this corporation a long time. And worked my way up, had a lot of opportunity to travel the world, oversaw the financial reporting for our Asia business for a period of time, which was about more than $1 billion in revenues. Now it's almost $3 billion. And then at some point I moved out here, and I'm in the auditing / financial area of our firm. So I attend audit committees in 10 different countries every quarter, from Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, India, China, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. So a number of meetings that I attend now. I get to meet executives in the world, and then have been digging into financials and operational and IT areas most of my career, and so it fits well with really it links in well with reporting and with my brother Jim's website. Jim is the Gateway Pundit, and he's my identical twin brother, and he started the site in about 15 years ago. And it grew and grew and grew. By the 2016 election, Jim's website was massive, and I was writing for him as well. I do this as a hobby, and Jim and I talk every day still, even though I'm in Hong Kong and he's in the Midwest. And we both were Trump fans from the start. We immediately saw something there that this guy can win, and we still believe that maybe he was the only guy that could have won. And Hillary was a very challenging candidate, but Trump, we saw something in him, and we loved what he said, and we loved his personality, etc. What happened for me, really, for Jim, is one day we were talking in April of 2016, and I shared how I said, Jim, I looked at the numbers, and I'm like, Ted Cruz is going to be done at the end of this month. So it was early April, Wisconsin primaries coming up, and the media is all on Ted Cruz's train now, anything but the leaders' train. And anyways, I figured it out, and I said, Jim, April 21st, he's going to be done. And he said, we write a post up. So I did, and then Drudge Report linked to it. Wow. And the Drudge links, when they link, you get a tremendous amount of volume. And Jim got a lot of Drudge links during that year. And so as soon as I got a Drudge link, I got the bug. And so ever since then, I've been writing for him almost every day, and I've had a number of Drudge links since. It's amazing how, for example, here I am in Hong Kong, and yet I'm the only guy at times writing on the successes of Trump's economy. And part of that maybe is my background. Part of that is the fact that a lot of these, I don't think journalists and the lefties even understand numbers. And, right. We could just see this economy has just been exceptional, beyond exceptional. For example, I wrote some posts that Drudge linked to in 2017. The year 2017 was the best year in stock market history. It had more all-time highs than every year prior. Than any year prior. It just it went up almost 50% in that year. It's kind of stagnated last year, but then last year was the year of the jobs, and again, historic efforts in results in the jobs area. So it's just really been fun to be able to report this, but it's a shame nobody else is doing it. So kind of how I got the bug. I guess it was a Drudge link.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So I did notice, I mean, obviously I read Gateway Pundit constantly and I appreciate all your fine work. I did notice there was a 3-part series on the Clinton Foundation that was hyped and then got a fair amount of attention. And that's why I reached out to your brother at first and then to you. Mm-hmm. Have you been involved looking closely with your numbers training into the Clinton Foundation reports?
To some extent, this story that came up a couple weeks ago was a bit unique, and we think it's just as big as, just as big. It ranks up there with Uranium One. And you know how it took a while for that thing to get going, and but that was massive. That was you know, it was shocking what the Clintons were doing with the foundation at that time. This story ranks right with it. So.
Well,
Yeah.
so the first is to give you, you may not know much about my background. So I got out of business school in 1980, and I went to work at an investment bank called Dillon Reed, and ended up running their merger department worldwide, and then subsequently going to work for the Industrial Bank of Japan, and then setting up my own firm, investment firm, from which I retired in 2002. So I'm not an accountant, but I've put together lots of deals, and I've used accountants and lawyers, et cetera, and I got involved in this line of work trying to alert people to the challenges and issues I saw with General Electric, which I did in 2007, and
Right.
Warned everybody that General Electric was going to blow up, and it's still blowing up.
Yeah.
And I believe I wasn't the first to pound the table on it, but I certainly spent a lot of time doing that, and General Electric, I think we both would agree, is a lot more complicated than the Clinton Foundation. So,
Right.
so when somebody came to me, a mutual friend of ours came to me and said, you know, I can't make head or tail out of this Clinton Foundation reporting, you know, would you mind taking a look at it? Initially I resisted because I don't like doing other people's suggestions, but then I really dug in March of 2015. And I realized it is the largest set of unprosecuted frauds in history. It is not simply the numbers that are in the public filings, it's the numbers that are missing from the public filings. And Jason and I have done 145 two-hour videos on this, 145.
Wow.
Taking it from all different perspectives. What I would first say, you're out there in Hong Kong, maybe you could take a look at, if it's not too much trouble for you, look at the filings that are supposedly on this foundation in Hong Kong. This thing does not exist legally. It is not, the Clinton Foundation, the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, was, the predecessor entity was formed on October 23rd, 1997, and it was supposed to be a public charity, meaning it can't be controlled by the family. On November 2nd, 2013, the Clintons illegally seized control of the parent foundation by amending the bylaws, which is something you won't see in Hong Kong, but you can see in New York State in the filings. So it's never been a public charity since November 2nd, 2013, yet it files in Hong Kong, and I think it has operations in China itself. I mean, in interior China. It's been operating in interior China since 2004, in theory fighting HIV/AIDS, but in practice having no legal authority to do that anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that, because that was one point that Hillary raised during the election, during her debate with Donald Trump, when he raised, and I had it in our first post back on, I guess, the 20th of February. And I put a little 2-minute clip from their debate, and Trump's just saying this thing, it's a fraud, it's a scam, and I remember Rudy Giuliani calling it the racketeering scheme, and Trump called her out on it, and then she went immediately and said, "Oh, we've saved so many people that, you know, large percentage of the world's population that has AIDS," and then
well, that's not
Trump.
true.
Yeah, isn't I know. Of course it's not. Right. And Trump at the end, when she was done, and then she talked about Haiti, and Trump goes, "The people of Haiti don't want you back."
Yeah. Well, it's true. You know, several of our videos have gone into great depth on this HIV/AIDS issue, and you know, I don't know how much you know about the history of that, but the truth about what the Clintons have done is diabolically bad. It is not simply, you know, paperwork errors. They promoted, illegally promoted the HIV/AIDS medicines of a company called Ranbaxy, R-A-N-B-A-X-Y, which is an Indian generic company. In May of 2013, the United States government, various pieces of it, fined Ranbaxy $500 million for having illegally distributed adulterated HIV/AIDS medicine to the public via the Clinton Foundation and other ways around the world. I mean, you can't go around taking credit for, you know, helping people who have HIV and AIDS when in fact what you're doing is totally illegal and hurting them. But that's what they did.
And it sounds like a typical pay-for-play Clinton Foundation scheme where they were taking money from this Indian firm and then turning around, helping them promote their firm. And then the firm's making money, the Clintons are making money, and the whole thing's a sham.
Right. And so you know from your auditing work, being on those auditing committees, that the way it generally works in the real world is you bring an auditor in to check your books. And depending on the level of the audit, sometimes it's level 1, 2, or 3, but depending on the level of the audit, they scrub everything. You say you have these 100 customers who paid this, they contact each of the customers, they cross-check it. This thing has never had a legally compliant audit. Never,
No.
in my opinion.
No. So, that does not surprise me at all. You guys amaze me, and just like so many people that I've seen over the years now, especially Jim's introduced me to all this. And by the way, I want one more plug on Jim. Before the election, Jim became like the 4th largest conservative website that was pushing Donald Trump. Wow. And Harvard and Columbia Journalism School did studies and came up with that. Jim has found some information from an individual who shared that Jim had twice as many Facebook shares than CNN before the election. Wow. That's how powerful he was. And we were pushing Trump. And now there's a huge effort by the socialists and by the Democrats, probably the Clintons, Soros, Podestas, etc., to shut down conservatives on social media because we were so effective before the election and helped Trump win. He's really got to tackle that, I think, before 2020, or it's going to be, I don't think he realizes how challenging it's going to be for him, as successful as he is.
Agreed. So on this 2009 story the 3-part story, maybe you could just summarize.
Yeah, let's do that. So we kind of broke it down because normally at the Gateway Pundit, our stories aren't too long; they're just direct to the point. But I decided to break this up into three sections. But then I've actually come out with a 4th and a 5th, and actually today or tomorrow we'll come out with a 6th post as well. But anyways, the first post that we put out was just to describe the situation, and it sounds a lot like what you're sharing about this India firm. The Clintons had an individual that they worked with, and his name was Marty Edelman, and he and another individual, Kavachi, got together in the 2000s and created a firm, and they called it AGT International. And one of the first things they did was begin to work with the Clintons. And from some WikiLeaks emails, John Podesta emails, we know that these guys were very influential in the foundation because there was an email that came out where someone described and summarized, you guys are probably very familiar with this email, the 50 or so individuals and companies and institutions that were donating to the foundation. And these 2 guys were highlighted. So we know that they were giving them a lot of money. It was noted in their millions, but we expect it's probably even more, or many millions. But these guys, and we also know from some Podesta emails that whenever this Marty Edelman would email Hillary, she'd respond right away. It's like, and they called him Marty. Marty's emailed you. So he had a presence he had a direct line to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. So that there just says a lot. That tells you they're crooked. What Edelman did was he also, we believe, linked the Clintons with some sheiks in the Middle East. And so that then was the connection between the Clintons and some Middle East money. And in turn, what the Clintons did is they helped these individuals start and promote their company, AGT. And AGT was into some very high-tech type of systems, products, that were used predominantly at first in the U.S. They're used by the Homeland Security, the State Department, the Defense Department, the Navy, very high-tech, sophisticated technology that uses radar, that uses cameras, that uses advanced artificial intelligence, and has some sort of defense technology with it that we're not really sure exactly what that is, at least I'm not. But But these individuals then sold this technology to like police forces around the country, in Philadelphia, in New York City, Penn Station, Amtrak, a number of these entities around the U.S. Purchased or had contracts with AGT. And this is while the Clintons are promoting this firm. The firm grew from, in 5 years, by the early 2010 or 11 or 12, they were up to $1 billion a year in annual sales, which is huge in the 5-year period of time, and over $8 billion in contracts. And then they started going worldwide. And anyways, any questions there before I kind of jump into what happened next?
Well, it sounds like somewhat similar to Palantir. Is there any connection there with Peter Thiel's AI company that's used for security and sold to police departments and things like that?
Not that I'm aware of, although he might be a competitor. And I know IBM was competing. I have some information that IBM was one of the competitors in one of these bids around the world. But that's what happened. This company, they set themselves up as a Swiss company. They had individuals in the U.S. And what happened next was they ended up doing some really kind of squirrely things, and the only reason you'd be doing that is if you're really, the only rational reason seems to be to commit crime. So we find evidence that they have individuals pretty much on one company, every individual, we have a list, almost every individual had an alias, so they're using a name that's not theirs. Now the reason we think, you seem kind of shocked.
Well, no, not shocked, but that's typical behavior.
This is the tactics of the Clintons. So the Clintons are masters, or the people around the Clintons are masters at selling the same thing 7 different times. Take their speeches, for example. Right, it's the same speech. Why would all these different groups, pay this gigantic amounts of money to hear the same turgid nonsense, especially from Hillary? It's the same tactic.
It's a scam and a sham, isn't it?
Joe, I'm looking at the AGT website right now, and it stands for Advanced German Technology, which, pardon me for saying so, that's an extremely stupid name for a company. But it's talking about, among its services are cybersecurity training, and you've just been speaking with us about some of the censorship that's happening for conservative sites and how effective Gateway Pundit and certainly people like Laura Loomer and Alex Jones and all of the well-known individuals in the world of social media. When I see this cybersecurity training as one of the services offered by AGT, I wonder what that encompasses, because we know there are a lot of operatives in the social media sphere who are finding things and targeting websites and individuals with various seemingly innocuous campaigns, but they wind up getting these people shut down, kicked off of social media, losing their PayPal accounts, losing their Patreon accounts, losing their Chase bank accounts. It seems like there's basically a playbook for how to shut down those that are effective.
Well, isn't that amazing? So AGT got into what's called, and maybe you guys are familiar with this, ITAR regulated technology. So in order to even deliver or be in this industry, you have to train all your people on they have to be ITAR approved or and go through training to make sure that they handle the business that they do properly, because it's so high tech and it's protected. You cannot be selling this type of product overseas to companies in countries like Russia or China. But that is exactly what AGT did. And so our second post was really kind of getting into those actions that AGT did. They were selling products overseas. They had aliases for most all their employees. Many of these people worked in the same location. They might have even 4 or 5 different email addresses for different companies. They weren't paying taxes. They considered themselves a Swiss company and somehow skirted the issue with taxes. They skirted around the issue for ITAR compliance by these aliases, and they formed various companies, and maybe perhaps to hide their true the true nature of their company from the Defense Department or other governmental agencies. So they did a lot of fishy things, but the most concerning bit of information we note in the second post is they started selling this stuff to China and to Russia. Very high-tech information. Never should have gotten into either of those parties' hands. It was a crime. It was perhaps treasonous to do so. So that was kind of the shocking piece in our second post.
What time frame are you talking about there?
We have evidence from between 2011, 2000, and at least 2016.
So encompassing the period of time when Hillary was still head of the State Department.
That's true. So some of this started when she was in the State Department, and then once she was out, yes, as well. And so the next bit of information that was most shocking, perhaps, was the fact that we have evidence that this company was and their fraudulent activities and the concerns with their activities were brought to the attention of the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice, there was even a sit-down with some individuals, whoever brought this information to the DOJ's attention. They had a discussion because we have a document, and we note this in our third post. The document states that, per the discussions that we had with the shadowy group of companies called AGT, here's some of our concerns, and here's some ideas that we recommend to the Department of Justice. Solicit their financials, obtain their intercompany service agreements. We believe that these agreements will show that they're hiding funds and monies that are flowing between the companies. Take a look at the fact that these individuals have aliases. Take a look at the fact that there's numerous individuals working in the same location but are calling themselves working for different companies. So basically commingling themselves, not well defining themselves, and in an effort to skirt taxes for sure, as well as hide their operations. So that was brought to the attention of a Department of Justice attorney, and it's redacted the location, the state office that was located, but it was certainly it supported there was evidence that these guys were providing to the DOJ, and so what we know from this is the fact that the DOJ apparently didn't take it seriously. They hid it from the American public, and then they terminated or just basically suppressed the entire investigation. And it's never been heard of until we reported on it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that really got my attention. What was the date of that meeting? Do you know?
Well, it's the letter. I don't have it here in front of me, but the letter's around April of 2016. So again, it's right before the election. And this is information that Americans need to know. I guess a question I have is, the Department of Justice has said, we have an investigation into the Clinton Foundation. I wonder if this was it. I wonder if this is the only thing that the DOJ is doing, and it was something that was brought to their attention and they killed. Who knows? Who knows what they're really doing today? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, so just on that a little bit, have you looked closely at the FBI vault file on the Hillary Clinton mishandling?
No. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, though.
Okay. So Jason and I got onto this last year. Basically, the FBI itself operates something called the FBI Vault. And it's an online service. Anybody around the world can, any government, anybody can look into it. And they typically put up their files on investigations that are interesting potentially to the public, but that are concluded. And so what you'll remember well, and I remember vividly in the campaign season, that the official Hillary Clinton line was, no, well, I'm not the subject of an investigation. I'm part of a normal periodic national security review involving all previous secretaries of state. Nothing to see here. Yeah. Nothing involved. Well, There's now a 30-part dump. It covers more than 10,000 pages. Okay, many are redacted, but enough are there that for you to see that say categorically, beyond the most recent dump came out on Friday, dump 30, that categorically, July 6, 2015, the FBI, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community formally requested, and the FBI had to open an investigation into Hillary Clinton mishandling classified information. That investigation was opened on July 10th, 2015, not 16, 15. And you can go through, by January 27th, 2016, a senior State Department employee had sent a letter to James Comey saying, look, I have evidence that Hillary Clinton is committing serious national security crimes. I have a high security clearance. I want to come sit down with you, Comey, and show you this evidence. This is right before the primaries heated up, when Bernie still had a chance. Possibly that guy was a person was a Bernie supporter. So you with what you know about this AGT, you then can look in this file and cross, and you'll be amazed.
Wow.
You'll be amazed.
Wow, that's great. Wow, that's great. And I'll look into that after this. And it just doesn't shock me. Everything, it's not shocking, but it's outrageous. It's infuriating. I guess it's still infuriating. If you stand for justice and you want fairness and justice in our country, which I always felt like we had, this is outrageous. But there was a culture of corruption in the FBI. I remember Michelle Malkin's book about the Obama team, just as he was starting his first term. Culture of Corruption, excellent book. But that's what he did, and that's what it was. And maybe this culture of corruption has been going on a lot longer than we know. Right. But it appears that it maybe perhaps has been. As you look back at some of these incidences over the years where individuals have were involved in crimes, and the FBI comes in and saves the day. No crime here.
Right.
So anyways, I was just looking at something today in that regard. So does not surprise me. So much corruption. The thing that's so frustrating is, where are the good men and women in the Department of Justice and FBI, the whistleblowers that are going to say, hey, people, you need to see what's going on here. This is outrageous. Where are these people?
Well, I know it's late there, and you've been very generous with your time, but I'm intrigued by these part 4, 5, and 6. What can you tell us about those?
Let me share that real quick. So part 3 was a shocker to me. I was like, here's information provided to the Department of Justice. They obviously looked at it and created an investigation, and then killed it and suppressed it from the American public. Number 4, we posted a couple days ago, and in that, let me see. I'm going to go back and look at it as we talk here.
The criminal investigation was suppressed and buried by the DOJ, FBI. It involved major New York Democratic power broker and the Clintons. And number 4, what we brought up and raised was just this incident where some individuals in AGT what they did is they, through back channels, visited this highly classified and secret type of place within one of the major cities, and they hid their identities. They called somebody from outside of the building ahead of time. They have his cell, and rather than signing in to go in and check this place out, they utilized this individual to get them in. There's evidence of that. The thing is, 2 of the individuals that went into this facility and looked at it were foreigners, and they would have to go through all sorts of scrutiny in order to visit this facility. But instead, these individuals from AGT, went around that through back channels and visited one of these facilities, which was, quite shocking. In our 5th post, which we put up last night, let me pull it up here and look at it. I hope we talked again about what had happened with in the day before. But the next piece is what we're pointing out, is that it appears that
AGT and the personnel, in their various companies, what they were trying to do is gather information. So, for example, this visit that we mentioned in our post 4, where they go and visit one of these secret centers, information gathering, where they're looking at terrorists and all sorts of stuff. It appears that they were trying to grab that information, and then it appears that they used that information then as a selling technique with entities like Russia. So they were saying, hey, here, we've got some extra information we can provide you too. Kind of showing off a bit, but also utilizing that information to share with the Russians overseas. And that's what it appears to be. And so that's the post. That post was out yesterday. And our headline was, media is silent. Nobody's really jumping on this. So I'm really glad you guys did. By the way, I've learned over the last few years, and I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, was just the fact that people on the internet are becoming the experts. And the media and the left wants you to believe that, these are a bunch of quacks out there, but not so. And it may not be people that necessarily are in these various fields, but some very smart people are starting to put the pieces together. And thank God for the internet in that regard. We need to keep it free so that we can continue to do this,
No, totally agree.
And I guess the final post that we hope to come out with today or later, maybe tomorrow, would be, it's related to just the fact that AGT then was not just paying off the Clintons, but then they were paying off other individuals. And so we have evidence that they paid off former New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson to go in and to sell their product. As a result of this, they were able to execute sales in about 8 or so police departments around the country. But they paid this guy off, and if you look at his history, and that's what I was talking about earlier, alluding to earlier, as you guys mentioned this, about the FBI. 20 years ago, there was an incident where a Chinese individual at Los Alamos had stolen some information and been indicted. Maybe you're well aware of this. And I just read it this morning or today. And this individual, then all of a sudden, a couple disks were lost. And Richardson was the Secretary of Energy under Bill Clinton at that time. And he was in hot water over this thing. And eventually the FBI comes in, saves the day, and says, no, we found the disks. They never were off-site, and no harm done. We believe they never even left the facility.
Right.
And so, again, maybe this FBI has been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. We trusted them for a very long time. And now it's time to really, now, in my opinion, we can't even trust this entity anymore. It's just, it's broken.
Right.
And so
Joe,
hopefully that fixed.
Sorry, one final thing on AGT. Just in looking at their website, I browse quite a bit through some of these online stock photo agencies. Every single photo here on their website is directly from a stock photo agency. As a matter of fact, this one we're seeing right now is one that I've even used. So it's interesting to me, when you go to their About Us page, there's a lot of high-sounding language, but it doesn't ever actually show the faces or name the names of any of the executives. So that in and of itself is quite telling.
Well, that's something, because what we found is if we went back in time, we were able to grab snapshots of their website, and they had all sorts of information like that out there before 2016. But somebody tipped them off. Somebody let them know that they were under investigation, and they went in and they changed their website. They stopped talking about some of the high-tech technology that they were using or selling, and they changed even their whole focus on their webpage, and took some of these people's names and pictures off as well. So that's not surprising. A lot of that happened around 2016 when they were under investigation.
Very interesting. So a lot of these graphics that we're seeing in your multi-part series on Gateway Pundit, is like Spa War and everything, these are graphics that you guys have found from the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive. These are legacy graphics and information that's no longer there, huh?
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
we got a lot of good information there.
So one other thought. I'm sure you're aware of Skolkovo. Just to put it in terms of transferring American high tech into Russia, one project you're going to want to familiarize yourself with is spelled Skolkovo, Skolkovo, And it was
Okay.
a project that was a part of Hillary and Obama's genius reset with Russia to create a Silicon Valley campus
Yeah.
in Russia. And there were elements in the FBI, in fact, in the Boston office, who were very concerned about it, that the people that Obama and Hillary were promoting as potential partners of American companies, investment firms, were highly suspicious individuals that the FBI had concerns about. The very people who were involved setting up this Skolkovo campus, they hired an Irish former government official who had been centrally involved starting in 2004 with the Clinton Foundation illegally distributing HIV/AIDS drugs to Mozambique and Tanzania and Lesotho and other places. That same person became a pariah in Ireland after 2008 with his brother, who was the finance minister. Brother died. This guy had to leave, and he went to Russia to be the executive director of Skolkovo, right? So he made his bones on the bad Clinton project, and they said, well, we could trust you to make your bones once again. So a lot of people like to look at this foundation and say, well, let's look at it from a Russian perspective or a Chinese or whatever. It is a global fraud. It is not a real foundation. AGT is not a real firm. Teneo is not a real, the Doug Band thing. The memo you were talking about is the infamous Doug Band memo, where he brags about all the crimes he committed, is the way I look at it. And he mentions the AGT thing as one of his prime crimes.
Oh, really? I didn't realize.
Yeah, that's what he was talking about. So what an honor to meet you this way. I hope we stay in close touch, and best regards to your brother.
Thanks a lot, and keep up the great work. I can't wait to view this later, and I'll jot that down and look into this. Yeah, because there's a lot more here. It's just shocking. It's actually really frightening. It's really frightening that this was going on for so long, and most of America still is just clueless. Our media is not doing the job it needs to. So, thanks for sharing this, and continue to do what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And frankly, Congress isn't doing the job it needs to do either. It's looking for, taxi medallions and Michael Cohen when it should be looking at some of this other stuff. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. People are going to want to go to thegatewaypundit.com. That is the website. And thank you, Joe, for joining us from Hong Kong. We'll speak with you soon.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
So there we go, Charles. That was really, I think, a very informative interview with Joe Hoft of the Gateway Pundit.
Yeah, welcome back anytime. I mean, he's a very smart guy, and there's a lot to the story that he's picked apart, and I hope he'll get a chance to maybe watch the rest of this presentation at some point and follow some of the leads and links. He's a first-class talent.
I didn't know anything about that AGT company before he brought it up, but it's amazing how, this is what I love about Crowdsource the Truth. There's no one person, no matter how knowledgeable they are, that can know everything, or like, for instance, I look at that website and the first thing that stuck out at me was the stock photos. And someone else might not realize that, and it just builds the picture of exactly what's going on there.
Right. And of course, AGT is an example of a company, I think, that sprung out of the fake Clinton Global Initiative, which itself is a fraud. And there's several thousand examples on their website still that they can't take down because it's in the Wayback Machine. There's a searchable database of Clinton Global Initiative commitments to action. We've done this before. And, if the FBI had agents who might want to, get more fully engaged in investigating crimes, it's a very simple thing to just take every single one of those those commitments to action and say, what percentage of them do we think might be legitimate? And, maybe 3% will be legitimate, but probably 97% of everything that's in there, will turn out to be a complete fraud.
But isn't it much more fun to send sexy text messages to other FBI agents than it is to investigate anything?
Well, I'm sure, actually I think that the line people at the FBI probably are furious that they've been held back for so long.
I hope so.
Looking into this. But great that the Hofts and Gateway Pundit are focused now on this AGT.
Yeah.
I'd encourage them, and we'll go online with them and encourage them to work with me on going through each commitment to action. There's a hell of a lot there.
It was great talking to Joe. I've met Jim briefly, and they do a lot of reporting when stuff happens to Laura Loomer, and she's good friends with Jim, I think. So they have a lot of Laura Loomer related reporting on there, and believe me, she generates a lot of information.
She sure does.
So moving on here, Charles.
Yeah, we'll go quickly through this. I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the President Trump CPAC speech.
That was epic.
I mean, it really was. It was like, I think just in the world of entertainment, there are very few people alive today who could do what he did. Remembering, he's almost 72 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
He had been in Vietnam.
I know.
You know, and you can say what you want about Air Force One and the luxuries or whatever. The guy doesn't sleep that much. You take anybody, you know, any normal human being, and you say, you know what I want you to do? I want you to go out, negotiate with Kim Jong-un.
Or just fly to Vietnam and come back and not feel like crap for 2 days.
Well, and take all this, you know, take all this shit in the media for whatever was happening. And then, why don't, you know, instead of recuperating, going down to Mar-a-Lago for the weekend, why don't you show up at 11:30 and give a speech for 2 hours? You know, to tens of thousands of people. Mm-hmm. And instead of using, you know, a scripted approach, why don't you just do it largely off the cuff?
Yeah.
I mean, it was really something, and I think all sorts of people are, of course, from the left, or some idiot person at CNN, and I repeat myself, you know, was saying that these are the kind of techniques that Hitler used. And I mean,
what?
I know.
What techniques?
That he called out Joe Biden's ancestry. And, you know, what they were trying to make it seem like is, you know, Hitler would say that you know, certain people are not pure and of the right ancestry. That is not what Trump was doing at all. You know, Trump was just up there giving a speech and making fun in certain places of himself, but making fun of a lot of other people extremely effectively in just the way that most Americans who are not, you know, scruffies and mired in this maniacal anti-nationalist, pro-open border crap.
Yeah.
You know, most of us would like to have somebody controlling the levers of power in the various places inside government who has a sense of humor. You know, who could just cut to the chase, doesn't need, you know, a whole bunch of consultants to tell him what to do. You know, he's lived life for a long time, and he's got some views.
James E. in the YouTube comments has an amazing cow fart emoji right there in honor of AOC, which another one of our commenters told me earlier is Alexandria, obviously communist. So that was good too. Now, Charles, I think that speech was very impressive from President Trump, but when you're normally flying on Ortel Force One, you don't get that much sleep in flight, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so you got to really rest up.
But it was funny. Yesterday, I had a lot of things I was trying to get done, and I heard about this speech, and I thought it was going to be a half an hour speech, and then I realized, holy Christ, it's over 2 hours long.
That alone is the type of thing. And back on Joe Biden for a second, are we sure that he's not an ancient alien?
I'm quite sure he is an ancient alien. He's one of the very few people, when I was in college, I think I mentioned to you, we had this rich donor.
Oh, the dinner. Is that the story?
It's not this dinner story, it's a different one. He was then quite young. He might have been just 30 years old or something like this in 1974. And he came to live in our residential college for a few days, and then to talk to each of us. And this was just after, I don't know if people know, that he lost his first wife.
Joe Biden?
In a tragic car accident that killed as well one or more of his young kids. Ooh. So this was just after that. And, you know, and he wasn't that much older than we were. He was 10 years older than we were, 11 years older than we were. Wow. And he came into a room of complete strangers, maybe 30 of us, 25 of us around a dinner table, and he was spellbinding. It was incredible. He would look everybody in the eye, and, you know, and he would weave tales together, and very quick on his feet. But, you know, that was then. And ever since then, he was Barack Obama's vice president, you know, and...
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, it's kind of like Paul McCartney wrote a lot of great songs before 1980 as well. Some would even say before 1970. So
But one of the high points, it was really actually amusing, this second story, one of the high points of the CPAC thing was when Trump got into the question of the crooked Hillary Foundation and Russian emails and asking for the emails from Russia. The crowd literally did go on fire.
Yeah, he is really kind of, even more than Ronald Reagan, he's the first celebrity president.
Right, and he's really good at reading the crowd, reacting to the crowd, and having the right face.
Yep. Obama was very good at public speaking and actually had very good comedy timing. Like he's funny, even though I don't like him at all. He can
be funny. Yeah.
He can be funny. I mean, he's not funny when he's destroying entire countries that haven't done anything to us, like Libya, but he gave some funny speeches. But Trump definitely electrifies a crowd,
right,
unlike any other president I think we've seen.
Right, but on this question of the Hillary Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Foundation and charities, I believe that that he will continue to hammer that theme even more.
Yeah. So Paul H.B. is saying that Trump has more energy than most members of Congress. I think Trump has more energy than most 25-year-olds. Yeah, not kidding.
Yeah, he's incredible.
There's a lot of people who are, they want to collect their Ocasio-Cortez check for being unwilling to work.
Right. And so we have this Mueller report. I know you have this just in, I think, where you have something that apparently that there's an Amazon page that's already suggesting the report will be released by March 26th of this year, which is surprising.
Well, it's a fiction, so he's been writing it the whole time.
But it will be very interesting to see the independent counsel statute or the special counsel statute that Mueller's operating under is different than the one that Ken Starr had. So they're different. They're different. Well, the Ken Starr one lapsed, and they put in a different one. So this report, I think in the old one, Ken Starr had to write a report which had to immediately go public.
Huh.
This is one where no, it has to first go to the Attorney General, and then the Attorney General decides what goes public. So count though, no matter what the rules are, I would guess that the mainstream and the Never Trumpers are very much on a campaign to release as much damaging innuendo and suggestion as possible. Barr did make in his testimony the excellent point that under our system, you don't get, you're innocent until proven guilty, you're indicted if the government believes there's a chance of winning conviction, then the government has to win the conviction. And if you're convicted, then you go to jail, depending on what the jury and the judge decide. You don't go down a process where we just decide to investigate you for the hell of it. We don't know that you committed a crime.
That is what happens.
I understand, which is why President Trump said this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't start with an actionable crime that they thought Trump or other people was guilty of. They just said, no, we're going to spend years and years and tens of millions of dollars manufacturing bullshit that we can hurl around the mainstream and lamestream media. Yeah. So I expect a lot of that a lot of mud to keep coming out. This Gerald Nadler, I ran into him once or twice, and what a horrible human being. But he's on a campaign. He's going to ask. He said on the Sunday show today, more than 60 people are now going to get document requests.
Based on the crap that Cohen was saying?
Just because he wants to do it, and to think that this approach is a winning approach for 2020 is a big. It was the Democrats who were fond of saying that it was a huge mistake for Republicans to impeach Bill Clinton and then not convict him, and they certainly were proven right in the 1998 midterm election. Republicans did not do well in that.
Why did they not convict him? I don't remember the details of
because
that.
None of the senators decided to. Few Democratic senators thought it would be worthwhile to look at the evidence. They just said, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, evidence. They're allergic to evidence.
We can't do that. We're talking about a Democratic defendant. We're not going to do that. So I will predict, not being an expert in politics, that this approach, this sentinel and this approach is just not what America wants for the next 2 years.
No.
Given the horrific path that the Mueller investigation has taken from the very beginning.
This was tweeted today.
Right, and that's what.
So tomorrow they're going to be issuing
Right,
requests
that's why I put
for
it up
60. So wow, so this is just more investigations into no evidence.
Right.
That's really wild, Charles.
It is. Now, we've had this up here before, but this is really for Joe's benefit, in case you're watching, Joe. This is what I was referring to, the FBI vault. You know, Hillary Clinton was very fond of saying, and our surrogates are fond of saying, that there was no investigation. She was not a target of an investigation at any time. It was part of a normal security review.
It was a matter.
Here's the not, the non-investigation. It's only a 30-part document dump, where in the most recent document dump, a lot of this is duplicative, but this version, when you get into it, it's quite a few pages in, they have a search warrant here, and they reveal in this version of the search warrant that one of the people who was absolutely a target of this investigation was Abedin. And there's always a suspicion that being the case, but she was absolutely a target. And the real question, this is unclassified as of February 6, 2019.
Oh, wow.
There's a delay in it going onto the FBI vault, and this came up on the FBI vault on Friday. So
emails, attachments.
We'd seen this, but what we had not seen before was Abedin's name. At least that's one of the things I noticed. And Joe and others who have not looked at this FBI vault, it is a treasure trove here on this Hillary R. Clinton investigation. She was absolutely, individually and with others, under investigation for mishandling classified information by the, quote, FBI. And here's where I think you get Abedin's name in this one. Wait, if we just go back up there, you see it says other, sealed. You see, there's still stuff. The FBI with the highest possible security clearance would have access to this whole file. We, the public, only get what they deign to give out.
Right.
But I've got to believe the law and order FBI people, who are the overwhelming majority of the line agents, looking through this file and then asking themselves, wait a minute, how come the file was handled in this way, and how come, the public doesn't get to see all this other stuff, and how come, see, the Inspector General says July 6th, they notified the FBI of a potential compromise of classified information. It's not...
Isn't that the day that Comey said no sensible prosecutor
next year. This is in 15. This is before the primaries, before the debates.
Yeah.
And they opened a criminal investigation on July 10th. Okay.
Charles Sparkmeister rightfully points out that Abedin has been in the shadows lately. We have not seen or heard from Huma in a while.
That's right.
Huma, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Anything else here we want to look at?
No, I think we jump back in.
That's pretty interesting, all this stuff that keeps getting released from the FBI vault.
Right. Now, this is really a significant thing. We won't spend a lot of time on it. Let it soak in. Some people have been saying, look, Charles, all this stuff where you complain about the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank and the UN and the World Health Organization and all that kind of stuff, you're never going to be able to hold people to account for that because they operate under sovereign immunity.
Oh yeah, this was great. I heard about this.
Right, and here's an example of this. This is a summary of this is a court decision. It's an interesting. You stop for a second. It's an interesting title: JAM versus International Finance Corporation. International Finance Corporation is a portion, or it's in league with the World Bank, and it's the body that provides all kinds of support, massive loans, occasionally equity investments. And has been operating, in my mind, in a suspicious fashion for a long time. These type of projects, frankly, these loans, these equity investments, shouldn't really be made by the U.S. government. It's the kind of stuff where if it makes sense commercially, then there's so much money out there in the world looking for good deals. You don't need this approach with a gigantic bureaucracy in 2019. You might have needed it in 1945, when the world had been blown up by the Second World War in a short period of time. You don't need it now. So, but the significance for this, it's interesting that it's a 7-1 vote. Kavanaugh did not participate. But this means that people who or on the hard left in the Supreme Court said, you know what, you should be able to hold the International Finance Corporation to account. And why is this important to the Clinton Foundation case? The International Finance Corporation made a fund of it, made a $150 million equity investment in Laureate in January, February timeframe of 2013, just as Hillary was leaving the State Department, while Bill was being paid an average of $5+ million a year by Laureate, after Laureate could not go public in the normal course of action. And many years into a deal that these big deal makers, Kohlberg Kravis, Roberts, KKR, and others who backed this pig, it was a stupid investment, they needed to have, typically the average holding period for these type of investments is 2.5, 3.5 years. The investment was closed in 2007. They hadn't been able to get a positive valuation event. Very useful in a situation like that to have some dumb schmuck investor, IFC, come in and buy the common stock that nobody else would buy. And they did that in January, February 2013, touting it as one of the largest single investment ever made by the IFC, without disclosing all these conflicts and without disclosing the various connections that Laureate had around the world with the Clinton Foundation, with elements of the Clinton Foundation. And so this type of a decision is a very useful one to have as you're thinking, you're a lawyer, do you want to go after Laureate, do you want to go after the IFC to get the $150 million back, do you want to go after the players in the Laureate deal? This is good news. It's Christmas in February.
But well, it's March, but that was February.
Right.
Why did Kavanaugh not participate in that?
I didn't read it carefully. I think he had some connection to a party or whatever. Some Supreme Court justices have to sit out if they have a conflict.
But Charles, it also reminds me that we're still one down. No vote from RBG.
Well, she would have been in. She voted.
But isn't it 9 people total?
Right, so Kavanaugh didn't vote. That's 8.
Right, 8. Good math by me. So she's alive.
We don't know that.
So how can a dead judge vote?
Oh, come on. It's America.
That's true. Good point. Well, I'm not laughing at the prospect.
Have you been to Louisiana?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I hope RBG is okay, but we sort of need to know.
So recently, this Dershowitz is all over the place, but there's something really odd about this.
Yes.
And I don't, he's now, Dershowitz, who is, sunlight is the best disinfectant, is one of the things I remember from summaries of law matters. But, here's a guy who is all for transparency, generally speaking, and yet,
as long as it's got nothing to do with him.
Right, exactly. And he's, that he would be involved with Epstein at all.
Well, he represented the victims and prevented them from testifying. It was very suspicious.
Right. Nice picture too. But there's something really odd about this whole thing, and my take on it is that this case was a potentially massive problem for the Clintons.
What about for Trump?
Less so for Trump. I mean,
why did he appoint this guy Alex Acosta to be the labor secretary? He was the one who was responsible for the sweetheart plea deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there have been a series of flawed appointments, and I think this does happen. Clinton had a whole bunch of them. Bush had a whole bunch of them. Presidents, why they can't go down a track of saying, let's vet our team for a year before, the election, and, so that we know we've got really good people. But anyway.
No one was protecting sex offenders and pedophiles.
I mean, I think, for certain, Bill Clinton visited Orgy Island. That we know. I forget whether Hillary did or did not, but...
I think they said she did 6 times.
Okay, well, that's odd.
That's a lot of times. And now they're saying that Naomi Campbell did, some Russian model who got arrested for stealing a prescription pad and writing opioid prescriptions. Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know if I should talk about this, but somebody contacted me with information about what's her name, Anna
Chapman?
Yes. So we're going to talk to that person and see what's up with that.
She's in Russia, I believe.
still has information.
Interesting. Well, so there's this phrase, beware the Ides of March. And this, I love Zero Hedge. I highly recommend it. Not all their articles are great, but many of them are quite good. And, this is a piece that just tells everybody you ought to be really careful here. The way I look at it, the financial markets and the geopolitical situation right now, we're well overdue for a crash. We are well overdue for one. A crash from a domestic political standpoint would suit the Democrats enormously, because you'd be able to sell the narrative to people who don't care about numbers, don't understand finance anyway. Of course, this is all Trump's fault. It's not that Obama doubled the national debt in the 8 years that he was president. It's not that Obama locked us into structural deficits. No, it's all Trump's fault. So it suits a large element in the body politic to have a crash, particularly if you're prepared for it and you can actually position yourself to win in a crash, which you can do if you know what you're doing. And on top of which, one thing that Donald Trump has done, which is pushing the envelope, is to address so many of the tension-filled places of the world simultaneously. We've got Netanyahu being now indicted. We've got relations with Iran, very tense, with North Korea, with Venezuela, now with Cuba, now around the world. He's just pushing the envelope everywhere, including China. And in this type of environment, it's like you're spinning plates. You get a lot of plates up in the air. Exact Topo Gigio.
Wasn't that involved with the plate spin?
Hell yeah.
Is it a mouse or something?
Yeah, Topo Gigio. So this is, I think, one wants to be very cautious here. This is not a moment to be taking out large loans and doing highly leveraged investing. On the good news front, who was it? It was Castro's son?
Oh yes, of course. Justin Castro.
Yeah. He is what appeared to be in very serious trouble up in Canada.
Yeah.
Of course, I believe he hails from Quebec, and Quebec would be a place where dead people vote as well. And there is a very controversial construction firm called SNC Lavalin, Lavalin, that has been accused of all kinds of things around the world, including getting involved in nefarious activities in Libya during the time we were involved in Libya. So the quick summary of what's going on in Canada is that the Attorney General of Canada, or maybe the former Attorney General, testified that indeed she had been pressured to affect the course of the investigation into SNC Lavalin, and you're not supposed to do that.
No, definitely not.
So Trudeau, who is more popular internationally than he now is in Canada, is lagging in the polls, facing calls for him to resign, and there is going to be an election, I think, in October this year in Canada. So why is that relevant to us? We've talked in the past about Canada and the connections that the Canadians have as funders and as joint venture partners with the Clinton Foundation. There's a school of thought that Trudeau and his people have obstructed an investigation into the Canadian elements of this fraud. Now, with him being under pressure, things could shift very rapidly in Canada, which would be good for us.
I want a DNA test and see if he's Castro's son.
We'll get right on that. So our friend Ted Malloch, I saw this, he sent it to me down below, he just has a piece in Gateway Pundit saying that the European spring is here.
Oh.
And that's good news. I tend to agree with Ted on this. I think that Europe has been pretending that the European project that began in the 90s of unification, that it actually works, because it doesn't work. It's obvious. Euro and this gigantic bureaucracy and all these crazy projects that attack business and attack the middle class and feed the elite bureaucracy. It just doesn't work. And there's a whole bunch of people trying to tell you it works when it doesn't work. And there are going to be a lot of pressure points as temperatures rise through spring and summer across Europe. So we could see more, who knows what's going to happen with Brexit. That may be a very bumpy exit, or it may ultimately come together well. But certainly Ted Malloch will be pounding this. And I don't know if he has a new book coming out or not, but
I don't think I realized his middle name was Roosevelt. That's cool.
he's direct descendant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's
Teddy
amazing.
Roosevelt.
Yeah, there you go. That's really great. And a nice guy.
He is a very nice guy. So the last thing, I just noticed this, and you had a link to it. This is, you can't make this stuff up.
Oh, yeah.
The co-founder
I love it.
calling Ocasio-Cortez a pompous little twit. I mean, he's left-wing.
Right. Well, that's just it. I mean, she's the epitome of a marketing campaign. She's young. I mean, I know some people don't like it when I say this, but she's attractive compared to a lot of the other people in Congress. And she appeals to people on an emotional level. So, saying stupid things doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah. And this is an area where science does. Plan would also, as War notes, kill everything on Earth.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. No wonder you don't want to have kids.
Reduce taxes.
That's right. Forget the deficit. We don't have to.
But what is the essence of what he's saying here?
You keep it down here. It's right. This would mean removing all water vapor and all CO2, which would mean the eradication of all life on Earth. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. And this guy's from Greenpeace.
Yeah, co-founder of it.
Amazing. I love it.
Right, but the science is settled.
Oh, right.
The science is settled, obviously. Yeah, she learned that, working at a bar.
Right. Yeah. You're not even allowed to talk about it. That's how
she's
settled.
been in Congress for 60 odd days.
We're in charge.
I mean,
Charles.
well, of course.
If you don't like facts, too bad.
So this was what I was referring to. It's a little bit more detail than maybe perhaps you wanted, but you asked, when we were talking about this morning, you said, would it make sense to just do a quick summary? So in simple terms, the Clinton Foundation has to be a public charity. What a public charity means is that it serves the public at large. It can't serve a narrow bunch of family members. It can't be partisan. It can't be, it certainly cannot be a vehicle to enrich the promoters of the charity. And just straight up, the Clinton Foundation, the main one, what is now called Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, is by the documents that they're hiding from the mass of the public, but that are available through New York State and California, by the changes that they made on November 2nd, 2013 to their bylaws, they concentrated the power of the Clinton Foundation, to operate the Clinton Foundation during board meetings and in between board meetings, which are very infrequent to begin with, in the hands of Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton on November 2nd, 2013. And then Hillary maintained one of those choice Class A directorships even after she announced running for president the second time on April 12th, 2015. She remained in that Class A seat until September 10th, 2015, without telling donors to her political campaign, without telling donors to the Clinton Foundation, none of it. So just by that set of acts alone, just that, this thing blew up. I would argue it blew up well before then, but certainly by November 2nd, 2013. So it's not a public charity, and it has to be a public charity. Otherwise, it's private foundation donors, Gates and other people who have given it money since November 2nd, 2013, hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars. They're not allowed to make donations on their tax forms to something they claim is a public charity when it isn't one. So this isn't a flesh wound. Yeah. This is like, I decided in the interest of advancing my medical health that what I would do was remove my brain, my heart, my skin, and my blood.
Well, it's going to reduce the health care costs,
of course. You died on November 2nd, 2013. You're done, okay? Yeah. Now, that's the recent death. You'll notice that this organization, the Clinton Foundation, has to serve a public interest rather than a private purpose. A private purpose would be scamming donors
Yeah.
and scamming publishers and scamming audiences to pay you $100 million for media appearances and books and whatever, because you're going to tell them about the good works that you perpetrated in the fraudulent foundation that you operate. Yeah. That is a private purpose. Yeah. Scamming a joint venture partner laureate to paying you $17.6 million to serve as the honorary chancellor of a fake operation, doing who knows what, because it's a part-time job, to make $17.6 million in 5 years, while in roughly 3 of those years, so I get that right, 10, 11, 12, 4 almost years, your wife is Secretary of State in a position to help out this laureate thing. Those are just 2 simple cases, and as you know, we could go on for hundreds of hours about the other ones. Then this whole idea where they say, you know, you should love us because we're, you know, stopping HIV and AIDS, or we're stopping AIDS is what they'll say. You know, people say, wow, you've got a cure for AIDS? No one's got a cure for AIDS. Well, I do. I've got Ira Magaziner over here. He's brilliant. You know, well, what they actually did here is they set up a scheme, and we're going to show you this in some detail quickly. They set up a scheme which, by the 2002, 3, 4 time frame, they took a bunch of companies that were bit players in the business of selling
Bleach Bit, the bit players?
No, not those guys. HIV medicines. They took some bit players who weren't in the game, and they locked in a plan to have dumb governments and dumb donors around the world send billions of dollars into central pots, typically in Switzerland, that then would be raped and pillaged, you know, with the money, instead of going to the donor countries that really needed the work, they would arrange for this leaky pot of money in Geneva to be raided by unscrupulous people like the Clintons, who would submit invoices or cause their functionaries to submit invoices for these drugs, but no one ever really checked to see, you know, whether the drugs were in fact purchased. If they were purchased, how did they get from India across the world? No one did any of that work because there's no audits.
Huh, right.
Right? So
I think we have a certain tiger to thank for that.
we do, BKD. But this is really interesting, this going a little bit into the nitty-gritty. Michael Smith has written about this. We've talked about it in the past. But there's an on-point decision in 1979 where this appellate court said a non-profit pharmaceutical service was not exempt as a charitable organization because it was operated for the substantial commercial purposes of providing pharmacy services to the general public. Okay, so that's what this is. This is, you know, and the HIV/AIDS stuff, this is not about losing money to distribute drugs for free. No, this is their clearinghouse where they went to government and said, Tanzania, look, you got an AIDS problem. And the leader of Tanzania said, I do? And yeah, you got a really bad problem. Why do I have that problem? Because I can get you a whole shit ton of money that you could claim was going to be used to solve the problem.
Oh, that is a problem.
That's not a problem, that's an opportunity. Right? So, you know, this, when you go through and try to put the numbers together, we're going to show you. We have ironclad proof revealed in a document that the Clintons have tried to hide, but we've had it for this document for many months. We're waiting for the right time to tell you all about it, where the Ira Magaziner and Bill Clinton locked in one of those win-win-win schemes where these marginal firms that were not really in the HIV/AIDS drug business could lock in a guaranteed profit by cooperating with the Clinton Foundation. That is not charity. And this thing, these 3 memos we've referred to before, the Clinton Foundation was never controlled tightly from its base in Arkansas. We've shown that. I'm going to show it to you again in a second. When we look at the way in which the Clintons have become rich, it's through exploiting their connections, generally speaking, operating in the guise of charity, using foundation assets. This is not, you don't get rich off charities.
Yeah.
Right, that doesn't make any sense. And I would argue that these Clintons still operate the largest network of criminal frauds in the guise of charity ever attempted. And you'll read these different memos if you care to inhale facts and absorb them and digest them. You'll understand that a charity, a tax-exempt charity, is not allowed to engage in any illegal activity.
Yeah.
So it's just the IRS sitting back and saying, you know, you're the former president of the United States. We expect Hillary someday might be president of the United States. We'll let you break laws until you become president when you're going to overlook all our crime. You know, otherwise we'll kill you. You know, it would seem to be...
Seems like a good deal.
Yeah, right. So returning then to numbers just for a bit, and I promise I won't spend a lot of time on this, but again, the convention here, red is bad. Sorry, red, you're bad. Now, this is the time frame where 2000, Bill's still the president. 2001, 2, and 3, he's floundering around trying to figure out what to do with his life, and you know, he's in trouble. He's under the FBI's investigating him and his donors and all this kind of stuff. But when people talk to me about, you know, their grand plans and this and that, a starting place for me is to say, okay, you're a global organization.
What are your goals?
What are your goals? How many people work in this organization, right? So by the admission on the filings of the Clinton Foundation, there was only one person on the payroll on March 12, 2000, when Bill was still president. No, he's never been listed in this period on the payroll, okay? And so there's only one person. It rises March 12th.
Who was that?
It was some clerk, I think.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And in 2001, you had 7 people by March 12th, 2001,
wow.
19 people by March 12th, 2002, and only 22 people by March.
That's amazing. In 2001, 21st Century 3D had more employees than...
Right. So we're talking here about a very small organization. Remember, charities cannot be loose affiliations of people. They can't be volunteers over here and some amorphous office over there. It has to be a real organization with real trustees and real, you know, fundraisers who are taking the laws seriously and producing reports and getting audits and doing all the kind of stuff that the Clintons they don't believe in doing that.
Yeah.
So they make a big to-do here in these filings of saying that the senior-most people, the officers, the trustees, receive no compensation. Now that's going to end up, should the IRS actually do what they need to do here, that's going to be a mortal wound. Because when you're thinking through the materiality of, did any of these people who pretended they weren't officers but really bragged about running the whole foundation, so they were officers, if you said you took no compensation from the charity, then the fact that you took $100 million in a disguised format out becomes even more material than if you'd say, well, I made $20 million as being an officer, and it's only 5 times. You know, it's still bad in both cases, but this is a big red flag. Then you look at the total compensation. Now, Jason, you know, because you've run businesses, how much trouble do you get in when you have an employee and you give him a paycheck that says, I took out Social Security, but you don't actually do that?
Well, I've never done that, but I can tell you that just by the nature of hiring different crew members who weren't permanent employees and putting out 1099s and stuff, I got audited by the Department of Labor.
Well, I'll just...
Because they said, why are you doing this with all these different people? So they were on top of it for some things.
Well, but if you look here, in 2000, they had paid paltry salary, $21,000 to one person, but they paid $2,700 in payroll taxes. Then in 2001, they paid $539, $540 in salaries, and they paid $42, which is almost 9%. Then in 2002, they said, you know what, we're going to pay $1.3 million in salaries, but we're not going to pay any payroll taxes. Now, you cannot do that.
Wow. Yeah. How did that happen?
Right. Well, because they're playing fast and loose here.
I always just had a payroll company,
Right,
and they did all this legal stuff.
And I am aware of cases. It never happened in anything that I was, invested in or involved with. But I'm aware of how seriously the payroll people take this idea that you're the owner of a large entity, and you're going to cut a check where you may have said to your employee, you know, I took out payroll taxes, but you're not actually going to declare it.
So and you're paying them less, and the payroll taxes aren't getting paid.
Right, and who knows what happened to the that's a serious crime. Very, people go to jail for a long time for that. And then you look here at this trend in per employee compensation, 24 average, then 88 average, and that goes down as we hire more people, only 71. It goes down further in 2003, only 66,000. Now, we're going to show you here Here are the numbers, and I betray my disposition by saying numbers tell me a lot, okay, and words a lot less. But these numbers show a growing organization, thinly staffed, that's supposedly overseeing a construction project in Little Rock, okay, that's only supposed to be doing work in Little Rock, that has a hell of a lot of money spent on legal fees. Now, why are you spending $149,000 in 2000?
Are they paying off the bills from previous legal stuff?
Well, I think, for non-foundation related stuff, they probably say, well, okay, cut us a check. I know we haven't paid you for defending us and Paula Jones and all this other stuff. Well, we'll get the foundation to cut you a check, right? And then they get investigated by the FBI and the IRS and the DOJ in 2001. Suddenly the legal bill goes up to $465. Now we're going to raid Manafort, we're going to raid Roger Stone, we're going to raid all these people. This thing was under investigation from 2001 through 5, actually. Where are the records of what the investigative team did looking into the appropriateness of these bills? $465,000, that's $1 million in legal expenses here.
Yeah.
Right? And we're not spending
That's
that
a
much
lot.
on employees, right?
Yeah.
And then you say, well, okay, in order to keep track of this, I mean, having been around people in prior work who were important people who had money, if you asked me to get involved in a situation like this, the first thing I would say is we want the toughest, most pain in the ass, persnickety accountants we can find to comb through all this stuff. We have to have the toughest controls possible, because the last thing we want to do, exactly, is have that happen. Is have the former president and a sitting senator and somebody who hopes to be president of the United States embarrassed by a charitable operations that goes badly off the rails. So instead of doing that, they say, well, while he's president, we'll pay nothing for accounting firm fees, zero. When he's in post-presidency, we'll spend $15,000 on it. Then we'll spend $19,000. You don't get much for, if a complex matter like this where there are conflicts, you're not going to get a decent job done when you pay an accounting firm that little amount of money on something this complicated. And then, for good measure, in 2003, when you're really going to get complicated, you're going to fly all over the world, you're going to do all this kind of stuff, that's when we're not going to pay an accountant anything. Because when you don't pay an accountant a bean, you can be very sure that you don't get any work.
Right.
Right? And technically speaking, I'm told by serious accountants that accountants can't give you an independent opinion without getting paid. Right? You have to hire an accountant. You have to go have the tension.
It's like a lawyer, right?
Well, in this case, you're trying to get the accountant to look at your books and audit you independently. So the client has to know that when you retain the accounting firm to render that opinion, you're not purchasing the opinion. You're signing up. Who knows what the fee will be exactly. You can negotiate it around terms, but you pay money up front before you get that audit. So that there's no opportunity for you to say, look, for $150,000 over here, you get your audit. That's not the way it works. You write the check first, a down payment first. You're at risk as the firm, and there's some nice tension there. The auditing firm can say, well, yeah, all right, it's worth my taking the assignment because they're confident enough in their books that they're willing to, be at risk for half of our fee or whatever the number is. So this is small stuff. The big stuff is in this direct mail line. That's where you get into fraud. Okay, when you are going around the country, around the world, using the mail, spending this type of money, first $500,000 when he's president, $1.1 million his first year out, $1.5 million, second year out, $1.8 million, you can't be going around the world saying, here are all these mailers going across state lines, using the mail, phone calls, follow-up, saying we're just building a library in Little Rock. When in fact, when in fact, what you're doing is flying around the world trying to fight HIV/AIDS. You can't do that. And the act, each solicitation, bearing in mind that in this time frame, they try to purposely hide how much they were spending on postage.
Yeah, why is it so high?
Because this is a massive mailing going out, and when you're a charity and in theory, you're validly federally tax exempt, you used to get discounted mail. So this was a very large solicitation operation. We've talked in the past about how they were tagged for breaking solicitation law in Mississippi 3 different times, and their number 1 fundraiser was tagged, their number 2 fundraiser was admonished. This is a big problem. Here you're talking about, just looking at it quickly, 1.6 plus, you're talking about $5 million in spending over 4 years. And they claim you have to register in this time frame in most of the states where you're soliciting and file reports that are truthful. We have most of those reports. I and colleagues have them. We've been studying them for years now. And it's just a treasure trove of offenses. And the way they solve that in their filings on the site is they say, all right, what we'll do in our forms, our IRS forms, we'll say, what states are we required to register in? And the forms say none in 2001. When they're spending $4,000 on registrations in 2001, they say, we're not required to register in any state. And then it's almost 12,000 in 2001. Now, then 19,000, they realized in 2002, we got a problem here. So what we'll do is we'll put on the form, we are required to do this in an attached list of states. But because the people don't check that stuff, no attachment. So they leave that out, right? So in here, the amount of the programs, these are when the IRS normally looks at a charity to say, well, how badly has it gone astray? They ask the question, how much money did you spend on your authorized purpose? Those are program expenses. 80,000, rising to 446, rising to 1.1, and then you get up to 2.3 million in 2003. This is going to be a crucial year, as I'll show you in a second. Now, along the way here, in 2000, 2001, 2002, nothing is described as being a special project or a project. But for some reason in 2003, when they're flying around the world doing things they're not allowed to do, fighting HIV/AIDS internationally without any legal authority, without any of the paperwork right, without any disclosures right, they come up with the genius move of describing that expense as a special project and nothing more. We'll just call it special. No one will check. And then meanwhile, this is a thing that was supposed to only do business in, not Little Rock generally, in a specific portion of Little Rock. No travel is required, really. So none was incurred. No travel expenses were incurred in 2000. $6,000 in 2001. When they start screwing around internationally, the expenses go up to $356,000, then $602,000. That's a lot of money when you consider there are only 20-odd people in 2002 and 3 working full-time. How do you run up a bill like this, $600,000 with 22 people on travel, when a bunch of those people are not traveling?
So it's a lot of money.
Right. So if we go to the next page, this is really, if it weren't sad, it would be hysterically funny. In Ireland, somebody made the equivalent of a Freedom of Information Act request. And we've talked about that in the past. And we were able to follow on that request and retrieve all the documents that the person who made the original request got. And these are documents that you would expect to see in any government negotiation, any negotiation with the Clinton Foundation and a prospective government donor. You would expect to see, puff pieces from the Clinton Foundation saying what they wanted to do, and then rejoinders from the government and internal emails saying, you don't want to waste this money, and back and forth and agreements and all. That's exactly what this is. It's, I think, 49 separate documents. We have them all. We have copies of everything. There's likely more than that. And this is just Clinton Foundation negotiating with Government of Ireland. So this is excerpts from a piece that was used beginning October 2002. Okay?
Is Dennis O'Brien at all involved in the Government of Ireland, or he's just cell phones?
So in this puff piece, the Clinton Foundation, Ira Magaziner and Bill Clinton claim that he launched the initiative in July 2002 in Spain. So first I heard about that. There's no legal entity in Spain or in Barcelona. And then by August 2002, they signed an agreement. We have a draft of it with this Caribbean outfit. And in September, they started working in the Bahamas. And we have some legal agreements from the Bahamas. In September of 2002, they supposedly signed agreements with the prime ministers of Mozambique and Rwanda.
Mozambique.
And then they supposedly, we'll get into this in a second, they claim they created something called the HIV/AIDS Treatment Consortium. It has a nice name to it. But you can't just do that. You have to have like a legal, you have to form an entity or a corporation or whatever. They claim they signed a memorandum of understanding with 5 different partners in October 2002, that they started having other negotiations. This HIV/AIDS Treatment Consortium met, supposedly, there should be a record of that, on the 16th of October 2002, and then it has plans to expand to Haiti, Africa, all these other places, okay? So this is what they're claiming beginning in October of 2002. They file their tax return for 2001, 28 April 2002 in Ogden, Utah. That's significant because that document was sent across state lines using the mail. So if you sent something across state lines using the mail that's a fraud, or it's incorrect, you've got problems if people want to enforce it. Who did they choose, Jason, to be the tax preparer?
Probably the Tiger.
The Tiger, you got it. So in this tax return, and I think in each of these tax returns for 2001, 2, and 3, there's part 6, question 76. Did the organization engage in any activity not previously reported to the IRS? Here are all these new activities that they're bragging about to donors, but what do they say to the IRS? Nope, we didn't. New activity? Not us.
Ask the Tiger.
Ask the Tiger about that. Now maybe the Tiger didn't know. Maybe it's Ira doing all this stuff out of Boston.
Ronald Reagan do their taxes. He's like,
Mr. Magoo.
I don't recall.
Mr. Magoo. So, they're forming all these the memorandum of understanding, and there's consortiums being created and all this stuff. Presumably, to do that, you would have to lawfully, you would have to make sure your articles of incorporation allowed you to do all this stuff, and you have to form international companies and this and that. Part 6, question 77. Were any changes made in the organizing or governing documents but not reported to the IRS? And BKD says, no, and no changes, right? Because these aren't changes. This is just, whatever. And then it says, part 6, question 80, is the organization related through governing bodies, magaziners certainly, trustees, officers, etc., to any other exempt, should say, or non-exempt organization? And with all these, you would have to list out SJS, which is the taxable for-profit consulting operation of our magaziner. You would have to list all these signatories here in the treatment consortium elsewhere. And instead, what do they say? They use BKD. They just say, no, we're going to lie about it. That's what we do. When you want to lie and you want cover for a lie, there's only one firm to hire, BKD. So this is stuff that you don't get to see because the Clintons have been successful in hiding it for so long. But we could go on this topic for a very long time. We will not do that. We'll go to the next page. Now this is hysterical, actually. We have the actual hard copy of this press release. And as well, we have a press kit that the foundation, set out to try to get you excited about this fraud.
It was part of the mail expenses.
Exactly right. So this was issued on the 23rd of October 2003, and it says Office of William Jefferson Clinton. And this is a classic thing they do. They sometimes when they want to gain additional respectability, they'll say his name is William Jefferson Clinton Presidential Foundation. You have lots of different names of initiatives that sort of sound the same. Yeah. People get confused. They say, well, he's a president, whatever. And this lady, Tammy Sun, who's now out with a for-profit business, she lists on her LinkedIn she was deputy director of the Clinton Foundation from 2002 to 2005 when this stuff was going on. So here the Clinton Foundation, there was no entity on October 23rd, 2003 called the Clinton Foundation. Okay? So if it doesn't exist, it's really difficult to have an agreement on anything. But they say in this press release, something that doesn't exist announces agreement on a major reduction in the price of AIDS drugs. Now, to date, I'm not medically proficient, but I'm pretty sure I remember that nobody has found a cure for AIDS.
Well, but a drug could be a treatment for it.
Well, as I understand it, it's...
Oh, you're right. It's HIV treatment.
Right.
By the time it becomes AIDS, it's kind of like you're about to die.
Right. So HIV...
can be treated.
You can arrest...
We should consult with a doctor on that.
Right, well, we should, actually. Yeah. HIV is... you might know one. But HIV is the enormous progress made since the 90s.
We could get Magic Johnson to be a guest on this.
Oh, good luck with that.
Well, he's the healthiest looking HIV patient I've ever seen.
Well,
he's gaining weight.
Well, that's yeah. But no, that's the point, that they have long ago made progress in the 90s, really, many years before now, in arresting the acceleration or the deterioration that happens to you as the HIV becomes more powerful, acting to screw up your body.
So, and by contrast, they've made no progress in arresting Hillary Clinton.
That's true. That's true. But so to pitch this as an AIDS drug thing, I think I would never let them do that if I were their lawyer or advisor. And now here they're saying it's going to help deliver medicines to 2 million people. Now, back then when they started talking about this in this press release, you were talking about, from memory, $250 cost per person, just for the medicine, $250 on average per person. That's $500 million per person per year that they remain alive. Okay? Now, the Clinton Foundation on October 23, 2003, barely had a bean to its name. So how the hell could they stand up and say, we've come up, an entity that doesn't exist has reached an agreement that we couldn't possibly reach to dole out $500 million a year for what could be 20 years on average or 10 years on average. Because these drugs, once you start taking them, you need to keep taking them. And if you're going after younger people who have a chance to live, they could live for decades, right? It's irresponsible, I would argue, to pitch a solution for, you've got a patient who needs this medicine and can't afford it, needs it for the rest of his or her life, could be 20, 30, 40 years. You don't just give them the first week's medicine.
That's the kind of drug dealer tactics.
Right, exactly, yeah. And so then you're using yet another, here's William Jefferson Clinton, now it's Bill Clinton. He announces that his foundation, okay, now his foundation, he's not a trustee, he's not an officer. On what basis is this thing his foundation? The basis is it's being run from the Harlem office that we, the taxpayers, have been paying for without disclosing to New York State or anybody else the basis upon which Bill is operating this pig. Okay, so then it says his foundation has reached an agreement with drug manufacturers. Well, how does a foundation that doesn't exist reach a binding agreement with anybody? All right, and then it says by October 23, 2003, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, which doesn't exist, is working with governments and organizations to set up countrywide integrated care, treatment, and prevention programs in Africa and the Caribbean. That sounds a little bit different than trying to put up a presidential archival depository in Little Rock, Arkansas, because the last I checked, Arkansas is not in Africa or the Caribbean. Right?
Right.
And then it lists out these manufacturers that supposedly, again, a non-existent entity, the Clinton Foundation, has entered into an agreement with a publicly traded South African company, Aspen Pharmacare, a publicly traded Indian one, Cipla, another publicly traded one, the diabolical Ranbaxy, and yet another publicly traded one, Matrix. Okay, where are these agreements? And who assessed? Remember we talked about the average pay of the Clinton Foundation person was $60,000 by 2003. Who are these experts that have decided on the strength of no experience and no medical credentials in the control of the Clinton Foundation? Who are these experts who are able to tell that these drugs purportedly to be made by these entities are going to pass muster with the World Health Organization and the Medicines Control Council of South Africa? And why do we rely? We have something called the FDA in the United States. Why would the President of the United States say, well, rather than, and this is very different than what I said I'd do, and it's not like I'm being investigated by the FBI. Oh, I am being investigated. It's not like I got surrendered my law license for lying. Oh, I had to do that.
The FDA is susceptible to influence as well. Do you know the whole story about how aspartame got approved by the FDA with Donald Rumsfeld as the CEO of Searle Pharmaceuticals.
Right. No. I agree, but I'm just saying, here's a case of a former president who's had his share of trouble, who's now trying to work his way out of trouble. He's got a young daughter who's just working at McKinsey. Why would I care about that? Because McKinsey was also spearheading the charge to help Ranbaxy Laboratories, become a world-beating drug company, among other Indian things. There's so many conflicts in this that should have been disclosed that weren't disclosed. And here it claims that Ira Magaziner is the chairman of the HIV/AIDS. Now they're calling it the HIV/AIDS Initiative, not the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. It's just the HIV/AIDS Initiative. And it says, again in this deceitful press release, the Clinton Foundation, which doesn't exist, has created an HIV/AIDS treatment consortium, which it claims includes the Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health, which is a serious entity, the Harvard AIDS Institute, which may be a serious entity, the Harvard Medical School Division of AIDS, which may or may not be a thing, Health Alliance International, which is a charity that got in huge trouble taking money from, I think, the IFC in Mozambique, and I think it's now out of business. Farm Access of the Netherlands, which is an old entity that specializes in procuring drugs and distributing around the world and is a foundation, and University Research Corporation. Where are all these agreements? These are material agreements that are not included in the tax filings, either federal or state or international level, for the Clinton Foundation.
Good thing nobody at the IRS is checking.
Exactly. And then they call this thing, the legal name of the Clinton Foundation on October 23, 2003 was the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. It certainly was not William J. Clinton Foundation. There was no such entity. But here Tammy Sun says, well, if you want to find more information, contact us at the www.clintonpresidentialcenter.org. This is one of many domain names that we're tracking down to see when was each one established, how long did it exist, who claimed to own it. And this is, again, another hallmark of fraud. You have to describe something that sounds interesting, and you create all these different ways to reach me with money, and then you stop worrying. You see, you call it this thing, you call it that thing. Obviously, they've covered their bases. They have all this stuff down. He's a former president. This must be legitimate. And then you start, and you get yourself in a position where a torrent of money is now going towards this mess, and people like the government of Ireland would be pretty embarrassed to admit that they didn't do their due diligence, and then if they get ever found out about the actual fraud, in order to get the money back, you have to say, well, I was defrauded. And then people in Ireland say, well, why didn't you do any diligence for a lot of years? Well, because I wanted the credit of working with Bill President. He's an honorary Irishman.
Is he?
Well, that's what they say. Yeah, they say he's part Irish. So, the Clinton charities, and certainly Bill Clinton, did not have legal authority at any time from October 23, 1997 through the date of this press release to do any of the stuff that they claim they did. Other than that, it's a solid pitch. Yeah. So if we go, but wait, it gets better. All right, so these bright bulbs decided that what they would do, those frequently asked questions, these are a few of the frequently asked questions that were circulated with that press release. Okay, so why is the Clinton Foundation making this agreement? They asked rhetorically to themselves. And then the answer is, well, something new. The Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, something new, was asked by governments. Really? What government did diligence to ask you to do something that you can't do because you haven't changed your articles of incorporation, you haven't got IRS approval in advance to do any of this stuff? What
government? Too many questions, Charles. Those aren't frequently asked.
Right. And it says to scale up AIDS care. Remember, that's not what they're doing. They're focusing on HIV initially, which is fair enough, but they didn't ask for that privilege or to pursue that purpose anywhere. And then it says, as part of these agreements, well, you have to have, an agreement is not like you hope something happens and I go along with your hope and change. It's like there has to be, it's a legal document, you have to pick what laws are going to control the document, what to be a real agreement, what are you giving up and getting, what am I giving up and getting, have we really negotiated in good faith? That's an agreement. This is just bullshit. That phrase comes up from now and time and again. So the first answer, there's no answer. Okay, it's a non-answer. How will the program work? Well, it can't possibly work because there is no such entity, but in theory the way it was going to work is you're creating kind of like a buying agency. You say to the governments around the world, if you, quote, associate with the Clinton Foundation, whatever that means, and who knows what you have to...
It's like fraternizing.
Well, who knows what you have to associate? Does that mean you have to slip me some money? What are you talking about here? What does association cost? Then you're going to get a chance to buy these ARVs at knockdown prices, okay? So the way, this is a little complicated, I'll make it very simple. The guts of this ARV, antiretroviral pill, is what's called an active pharmaceutical ingredient. That's like an engine.
You told us about.
It's an engine. And so Matrix was the one that was making the engine that all these three companies were using.
That was in China, right?
That was MChem, yeah. Matrix bought MChem, but Matrix is the parent company. So Matrix was making that engine, and they said, you know what? For the companies that are buying our engine, we will knock the price down if governments associated with the Clinton Foundation and other people associated with the Clinton Foundation are going to buy these pills for use in these desperately poor countries. We'll lower the price. Okay? Well, fair enough. Okay? That in theory, if the Clinton Foundation were authorized for this, could have maybe made sense. Okay? But the question would be, are these arrangements that are allowing, that Matrix is doing to lose money in the process? Or has Matrix made a commercial decision here that by participating with the Clinton Foundation, they can dramatically expand their business and make a lot more money, which is, you'll see, is why they did this. How did the Clinton Foundation, again, it doesn't exist, pick the companies? And they go through this cock and bull story of how they did it. It basically makes no sense. I mean, the real question would be, in 2002, when the World Health Organization came up with a new list of companies that might be allowed to provide generic HIV/AIDS medicine, who were those companies? Right? How many of those companies had to qualify? The Medicine Controls Council in South Africa, it's great in South Africa, but that doesn't mean squat. I mean, you need an entity in a big market with husky regulatory experience and history and take attention to detail. South Africa was very negative. The government was negative on the idea of HIV being a problem at all. So their Medicine Control Council is not something I would listen to at all in this time frame. And the World Health Organization, we know what we think about that. So this is a cock and bull story, but where it becomes really dramatically bad is the next page. The next and final page. All right, how are the prices set? Okay, they say, well, for a long time, the way it works is the suppliers and various people get together, we talk about how to bring prices down. Yeah, okay, right. Then it says, since last spring in 2003, teams of cost experts from the Clinton Foundation. Remember, we said there are 22 people total from the Clinton Foundation. Who are these cost experts, quote, from the Clinton Foundation?
Yeah, and what do they know about pharmaceuticals?
They don't know squat. These are volunteers. They're claiming, were part of the Clinton Foundation, but there's no evidence that there were people under the control of the Little Rock operation that validly could take Foundation resources that were supposed to be devoted towards building the archive in Little Rock and spend it on plane tickets and hotel and whatever.
These are the people getting paid 20 grand with no payroll tax or 30,000 in travel expenses.
Exactly. Why don't you go to India? So these people, these experts, went to facilities in India and China, Korea, and maybe they went by train.
They're like, oh, that looks like a pill to me.
That's right. Maybe they went by train, So
AOC.
It said the volunteers had years of experience. Okay, but they're volunteers. They're not under the direction. You have to be under the control of the Clinton Foundation. If you're a volunteer, in this important area, you got no skin in the game. What if the volunteer gets the thing wrong? What if there's nothing you could do. So it says here that this, for we money people, the prices were set for these drugs to figure out the production costs, depending on different volume. The higher the volume, the lower the cost per pill. But giving the vendor overhead, depreciation, and cost of capital back, as well as a small profit margin. So what they were doing, these idiots, is they thought they could pull this over in the world. They go to the governments, and they say, you've got an AIDS problem. So the government say, yep, we got an AIDS problem because we got a Swiss bank account fill that up problem. And that will only be addressed if we have these torrents of money coming towards us. Then they go to the companies and they say, you've got an image problem, right? Now, you're small, you're not in the HIV/AIDS business, but we've got this billions, tens of billions of dollars coming your way.
And everybody thinks you're a corrupt pharmaceutical company. We're going to fix that image.
That's right. And we're not asking you to lose money. We're coming to you and say, you're not selling any of this crap anyway, right? Work with us. We'll figure it out so that you can make per pill maybe less than you're making on your core business, but you're going to make a guaranteed profit on every pill that you sell to us, and we've got the customers, we've got the governments, lining up. We have an access to all that money, and this is a business development triangulation fraud, right? The governments.
What do you mean triangulation?
You've got a triangle. You've got here. You've got a fake charity in the center of it that doesn't have any authority to do any of this, and the governments need the money.
There's three people involved in a fraud.
Triangulation. They're all defrauding each other. They're all. And of course, BKD, they're great at writing internal memos and marketing puff pieces about how they like to control things. BKD's in the center of all this. Either they knew by 2003 that Ira Magaziner and his team were off making these extravagant claims, signing the foundation up to get in the middle of billions of dollars of aid flows on the basis of false and materially misleading documents, or they didn't. In either case, they're in serious trouble because their names are on the tax returns in this time frame, 2000. Actually, from the beginning, more or less, right the way through to 2012, and afterwards, BKD's on the tax forms, they're on fake audits, and when you are trying to operate in an area like this, and you're careful, the first thing, when somebody comes to me with a project and says, look, this is a great project, I've got a former president, I've got an international project, I've got a charity, I'm like, stop, right there, probably not, well, who's your auditing firm? BKD. Right away, you don't need more than a minute to figure out that's not something you should do, right? So, there's a lot of work, and it's interesting, we were talking about the chilling effect on conservatives. This is a link to the Daily Caller piece with Marsha Blackburn's team in September of 2016, issued a fantastic report. We've had it up before, but when I tried to have a link directly to the report, it came back as broken. Is that the report itself, or is that?
It's an article from the Daily Caller, I guess, about the report.
And I think in that article, it should, I can't see, but it should be there should be a link to the report in the article. But that article is well worth reading here, because at the root of all this, standing back from the minutia for a second, at the root of all this, what happened under Bill Clinton's presidency from 93 till 2001 and afterwards was that instead of the United States dominating the world at teaching, countries, rising large nations like India and China, that rule of law makes sense, corruption is bad, let's take the best of what you can offer your ancient civilizations and what we can offer our modern business practices and build really honest, decent, thriving enterprises. Nah, that's not what happened. What happened is corrupt interests around the world, especially in America and China and India, said, we have a different plan. Our plan is to scam the schmucks who give hundreds of billions of dollars away to charity. We're going to do that through this presidential foundation, and then we'll allow this crooked team that we know is crooked because we figured this out, to then use the charity as a cover to create all these crooked investment deals around the world. And once we're in from China and India and elsewhere, Russia, once we have the ability to get into Chappaqua and get into Washington, D.C., and get with all these politically connected people, we're going to steal as much shit as we can, as much intellectual property as we can. We'll toss Clinton a $100 million bone or $200 million bone, but we are going to steal the guts out of General Electric and IBM and Ford and all these. We're going to have our engineers in there, our spies in there. We're going to cozy them up through the Clinton Foundation, cozy them up through academia, cozy them up through American India Foundation. That's what was really going on here. We, and especially Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton, were the schmucks. They're not the geniuses here. They for the moment, they've got whatever it is, a couple $100 million officially. But when these spinning plates start crashing down, they're not going to crash down on the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. They're going to crash down on the Clintons. And
I wish Hillary was also pointing at Chelsea in this picture, because then it's like, who's left holding the bag?
That's right. That's right. So, in closing, this is a scandal. This is now officially, today's March 3rd. By the time we next get together, I will have been on this for 4 years. In 4 years, it's one presidential term. 4 years is a lot of time to consider these different issues. In the 4-year period, not once has the Clinton Foundation or any other party come to me and said, "You're wrong. You got this wrong, that wrong." No one's done that.
They've tweeted some nonsense.
But no, they haven't been able to say,
not directly towards you.
Right, not once. And so Donald Trump I'll give anybody who wants to be president of the United States a chance to find his or her feet as president. Donald Trump, I think, at the CPAC meeting recently and for many months, has demonstrated that he now gets the weighty responsibilities that he does have, and he evidently believes he's going to run for office in 2020. In order to win and keep his base, he's got to drain the swamp. There's got to be tangible evidence that the swamp is in the process of being drained.
Yeah.
And we see day after day, week after week, that the Clintons, they're like those monsters from those horror movies that you can't kill.
The hair in the drain, Charles.
You can't kill them. I mean, they go down and they're back, and now they're back again. She's down in Selma, Alabama now, mouthing off.
What is she saying?
She's down. You see, she said something like, "The White House is lifting up racists."
Yeah. Right.
My friends, with a fake Southern accent, of course.
Oh my God.
This mess, this charity fraud mess, we don't even know. Forgetting all this HIV stuff and all this international, we don't even know. We can't even say for certainty that the Clinton Foundation presidential records are all in the Little Rock facility. We can't even say that.
Charles, they haven't been lifting up racists at the White House since 1992.
Yeah. Or 3.
Somebody grab her feet.
So that's it, Jason. It's been a long one today. We had a great contribution from Joe Hoft.
Yes, and a new official policy on the show.
That's a good one. I like that.
Well, Charles, thank you for another wonderful presentation. I think everyone is always, we got some nice comments today that we are achieving the impossible, making forensic accounting entertaining. And I thank you for doing that. I want to remind everybody that Crowdsource the Truth is a community-sponsored show, news resource, program, channel, whatever you want to call it. I hope that people will go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. On those two channels, you're going to get access to exclusive content, and people who join us for $10 per month or more, which is still really just pennies per day. If you're out there giving your money to Starbucks, I don't think they're enriching you as much as this entertainment and information is. But if you become a subscriber for $10 per month or more, you're going to get a free Sunday with Charles screensaver, and also access to Discord chat, which is useful during all of these exclusive shows. Tomorrow we've got Ole Damagard, and John Carmen will be returning. Okay. John was a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agent who became a whistleblower. I think he's going to speak to us about how he worked with Christopher Ruddy when Chris was writing that book, The Strange Death of Vince Foster, because John was also in the Secret Service. So this is a guy who has a lot of information, firsthand information, and unfortunately, like so many whistleblowers we hear from, he's been really suppressed. Now, one thing I've been discussing with the various guests that come on these exclusive subscriber-only shows is that it's a little bit of a problem that I've got the entry-level subscription at $1 per month, because it makes it difficult for some of the other guests to have people subscribe there. So in April, I'm going to be raising the minimum subscription to $2 per month, which I personally think is still very modest. I apologize to people who can't afford that, but there's still tons of free content here on YouTube that we're providing, including this program, and I thank you for that, Charles. Thank you for another great presentation about future felons with great hairdos, and I'll see you on Wednesday when we'll be closing in.
All right, Jason, thank you.
Thanks for watching, everybody.